My brother stole $54,000 I sent to save the family farm. But when I confronted him at Christmas, my parents called me a liar and jealous. Until 6 months later, they came back begging. I'm 32 years old. I work as a lawyer in Chicago. And I need to tell this story because what happened last Christmas basically destroyed any illusion I had about my family. I guess I should start from the beginning, when I left the farm in Illinois to go to the city to study law. I don't remember much about the first years in Chicago. To be honest, I was so busy trying to survive between classes and part-time jobs that I barely had time to think about the farm. But what I do remember perfectly is when my mom called me like 3 years ago, crying, telling me they were going to lose the farm if they didn't get money soon. The thing is, I grew up on that farm, you know? My dad Paul had inherited it from his father, and my mom Diane basically dedicated her entire life to keeping it running. My brother Matthew, who's 4 years older than me, stayed there after high school because it was always the plan that he'd take over the place eventually. I, on the other hand, never really fit into that world. Since I was a kid, I liked reading, studying. I dreamed of getting out of that small town where everyone knows everyone and doing something different with my life. My parents never really understood it. They supported me when I said I wanted to go to college, but I always felt like they thought I was wasting my time and that I should have done something more practical, like staying and helping on the farm, or at least studying something closer to home. Matthew was always the favorite. I'm not going to lie. It's not like my parents were cruel to me or anything like that, but it was obvious he was the golden child, the one who did everything right, the one who stayed to continue the family legacy. I was the weird one, the one who went to the big city and became a lawyer, something my dad never fully understood. I think for him, my work was something abstract, not like the physical work of the farm that he could see and touch. But anyway, I had made peace with that, or so I thought. I lived my life in Chicago, had my apartment, my job, my friends, and I visited the farm like 3 or 4 times a year for holidays and important birthdays. Then that call came 3 years ago. My mom was desperate, saying they'd had 2 bad harvests in a row, that corn prices were rock bottom, that equipment was breaking down, and the bank was threatening to foreclose on the mortgage. I asked her what was going to happen with Matthew, if he couldn't help or get a loan or something, and she told me Matthew was doing everything he could, but it just wasn't enough. The truth is, it broke my heart to hear her like that, because despite everything, I love my family and that farm was everything to them. So I told her I was going to help. I started sending money every month. It wasn't a small amount. I'm talking about like $1,500 monthly. Sometimes more when I could. For me, it was a big sacrifice because Chicago isn't cheap and I was still paying off my student loans, but I thought it was the right thing to do. My parents needed help and I had the means to give it to them. At first, when I talked to my mom on the phone, she'd mention the money and thank me, but after a few months, something changed. She started talking about how Matthew was saving the farm, how he'd found ways to get extra money, how he was working day and night to keep everything afloat. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured my mom was just proud of her son, and obviously Matthew was also contributing somehow. But then I started noticing weird things. Every time I visited for the holidays, my parents wouldn't stop talking about Matthew, about how incredible he was, how without him they would have lost everything. My dad would say things like, "Matthew is the real hero of this family." And my mom would nod and add, "I don't know what we would have done without him." And I was sitting there thinking, hello? What about the money I've been sending religiously every month for? The last 3 years? But I didn't say anything because, I don't know, I guess I thought maybe I was being selfish, that I shouldn't expect recognition for helping my own family. Last year, things got worse. Every time I called home, everything revolved around Matthew. Matthew had bought a new tractor for the farm. Matthew had renovated the barn. Matthew had hired extra help for the harvest. And I kept sending my money every month, watching it disappear from my bank account, wondering how the hell Matthew was achieving all this if the farm was supposed to be in financial trouble. But again, I didn't say anything. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there, but I guess I didn't want to believe my own family was doing something like this to me. Christmas came and I drove from Chicago to the farm, like 5 hours on the road, alone in my 2018 Honda Civic, listening to music and trying not to think too much about how weird my relationship with my family had become. It was Christmas Eve when everything exploded. We were having dinner, turkey, and the whole traditional deal, And my dad raised his wine glass and said, "I want to make a toast to Matthew, who has saved this farm with his hard work and dedication." And everyone raised their glasses, and I just sat there feeling like something inside me was breaking. I couldn't take it anymore. I asked them, "What about the money I've been sending?" My mom looked at me confused and said, "What money?" And I told her, "The money I've been sending every month for the last 3 years, $1,500 or more, to help save the farm." There was an awkward silence, and then Matthew laughed, like a nervous laugh, and said, "Nicole, what are you talking about? You haven't sent anything." And I looked at him like he'd grown 2 heads because I could literally see my bank statements in my mind. Every transaction, every date, every amount. My dad said, "Nicole, I don't know what game you're playing, but it's not funny. Matthew is the one who's been keeping this farm alive, not you." And my mom added, "Honey, I know maybe you feel bad about not being able to help, but you don't need to make things up. Matthew has been wonderful." And I just sat there, feeling like I was in a nightmare, trying to process the fact that my own family not only didn't believe me, but was accusing me of lying. I tried to explain to them. I told them I could show them the receipts, the bank transfers, everything. But my dad raised his hand and said, "That's enough. I'm not going to let you ruin this dinner with your lies and jealousy. Obviously, you're resenting Matthew because he stayed here and is doing something important with his life while you went off to the city. And that was what really destroyed me, you know? Because in that moment, I realized that no matter what I said, no matter what evidence I had, my parents had already decided to believe Matthew instead of me. I got up from the table, told them I was going to sleep and we'd talk in the morning when everyone was calmer. But I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake in my old room, the one that still had college posters on the walls, staring at the ceiling and crying, wondering how my own family could think so little of me. And then I got angry, like really angry, because I'd been sacrificing myself for 3 years, sending money I needed for my own life, and they couldn't even acknowledge that I'd done it. Not only that, but they were calling me a liar and jealous. And the next morning, Christmas Day, I got up early. I didn't go down for breakfast, just threw my stuff in my suitcase and left the house. My mom saw me from the kitchen window and came running out, asking where I was going. I told her I was going to Chicago to get proof of every cent I'd sent, and when I came back, they were going to have to look me in the eyes and admit they were wrong. She tried to stop me, saying I was being dramatic, that we should talk like adults. But I was already getting in the car. My dad came out too and yelled at me that if I left now, on Christmas, I was choosing to break with the family. And I yelled back at him, "You already broke with me when you decided to believe Matthew instead of me." I drove those 5 hours, crying, half the way, furious the other half. I got to my apartment in Chicago around 2 in the afternoon, Christmas Day, completely alone. All my friends were with their families, the streets were empty, and I was sitting there in my living room, surrounded by silence, thinking about how absurd everything was. But I wasn't going to give up. I waited until the day after Christmas, when the banks opened again, and went straight to my branch. I explained the situation to an employee, told her I needed printed copies of all the transfers I'd made to the farm's account over the last 3 years, with my name, the dates, the amounts, everything. The employee was super nice. I think she realized something serious was going on. It took like 2 hours, but she finally gave me a thick envelope with all the receipts. There were pages and pages of transfers, each one clearly marked with my name, Nicole Anderson, the date, the amount, and the destination account, which was the farm's. It was like $50,000 in total over 3 years. $50,000 that my brother had taken and presented as if they were his. I went back to the farm 2 days later. This time, I didn't call ahead. I just showed up. It was like 10 in the morning and everyone was in the kitchen having coffee. When I walked in, my mom looked at me surprised and said, "Nicole, we thought you weren't coming back." And I took out the envelope and put it on the table, saying, "Here's your proof." My dad opened the envelope and started going through the papers, and I could see how his expression changed from confusion to shock. My mom was looking over his shoulder, and Matthew was standing there, pale as a ghost. But then, instead of apologizing, instead of admitting they were wrong, my dad said, "These could be fake. It's easy to forge bank documents these days." And I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe they were still accusing me of lying when I had the evidence right there in front of them. I said, "Seriously? You're seriously accusing me of forging bank documents? Why would I do that? What would I gain from lying about this?" And my mom, "God," my mom said, "maybe you're jealous of the attention Matthew has been getting and you want to steal it from him." That was it. I picked up the papers from the table, put them back in the envelope, and told them, "You know what? I don't need this. I don't need your recognition. I don't need your gratitude. And I definitely don't need you treating me like I'm a liar and a jealous person. I've been sending money for 3 years while living in an apartment I can barely afford, while eating ramen half the week so I could help you. And this is how you repay me, so it's over. I'm not sending another cent, and when you lose the farm, don't call me asking for help." My dad got up and told me I was being childish, that family supports each other without expecting anything in return, and that obviously I'd gone to college and become selfish. I told him, "No, Dad. Family supports each other with honesty and respect, and you don't have either of those things." And I walked out of that house for the second time. But this time, knowing I probably wouldn't be back for a long time. The next 6 months were weird. I'm not going to lie. I didn't talk to any of them. I'd blocked their numbers, deleted their emails without reading them. My friends would ask me about my family, and I'd just say we were going through a difficult time. I focused all my energy on my work, on my life in Chicago, on trying to forget I had a family that had betrayed me in that way. The money I used to send to the farm I was now using to pay off my debts faster, to fix up my apartment, to actually live a little instead of just surviving. Then, like 6 months after that last fight, on a Saturday morning, someone knocked on my apartment door. I opened it, and there were my parents, standing in the hallway, looking older than I remembered them. My mom had red eyes, like she'd been crying, and my dad couldn't look me in the eye. I asked them what they were doing there, and my mom said, "Can we come in? We need to talk to you." I let them in, more out of curiosity than anything else, and we sat down in my small living room. My dad was the one who spoke first. He told me, "Nicole, we came to apologize. Matthew confessed everything. He told us he'd been taking your money and presenting it as if it were his. He said you sent him the farm's account number 3 years ago, and all this time you've been depositing directly there, and he just told us the money was from extra jobs he was doing or loans he'd gotten. And when you confronted him at Christmas, he panicked and lied, and we believed him because we wanted to believe him." My mom started crying and said, "We're so sorry, honey. We have no excuse for how we treated you. We should have believed you from the beginning." And I just sat there, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. Because yes, I was right. But at what cost? Having to prove to my own family that I wasn't a liar? I asked them, "Why did Matthew confess now? What changed?" And my dad admitted, "The farm is in trouble again. Without your money these last 6 months, we've been struggling." And Matthew finally broke down and told us the truth. And that's when I got angry again, because I realized they weren't there because they genuinely understood what they did to me, but because they needed my money again. I told them, "So you only came because the farm is in trouble? Not because you realized you treated me horribly?" And my mom said, No, we came because we want to make things right with you. The money doesn't matter." But I could see in their eyes that it did matter, that it was at least part of the reason they were there. I asked them, "Where's Matthew? Why didn't he come with you to apologize in person?" And there was an awkward silence before my dad said, "We thought it would be better if we came first, to smooth things over." And I laughed, like a bitter laugh, and said, "Smooth things over? Really? He's the one who lied to you, who took my money and took credit for it, and he can't even come look me in the face and apologize. You're still protecting him?" My mom tried to defend Matthew, saying he was ashamed, that he didn't know how to face me. But I told her, "Mom, do you realize what you're doing? Even now, even after knowing the truth, you're still defending him. I'm the one who was betrayed. I'm the one who was called a liar. And you're still more worried about Matthew's feelings than mine." And my dad tried to interrupt, but I didn't let him. I continued saying, "If you really want to fix this, Matthew needs to come here and apologize himself. You're not going to be able to do this for him." They stayed like an hour longer, trying to convince me to come back home, to give them another chance, but I made it clear it wasn't going to be that easy. I told them I appreciated that they'd come to apologize, but that I needed time to process everything, and that I definitely wasn't going to send more money until things were really resolved. When they left, I felt exhausted, like I'd just run an emotional marathon. A week later, on a Friday night, Matthew showed up at my door, alone, without our parents. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days, and when I let him in, he just fell apart. He sat on my couch and started crying, saying, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Nicole, I don't know what happened to me." He told me he'd been jealous of me since I left for college, that he always felt our parents secretly wished he was more like me, more ambitious, more successful, and that, when I started sending money, he saw an opportunity to finally be the family hero. He told me at first he thought he'd only do it for a while, that eventually he'd give me credit, but the attention and praise from our parents were addictive, and he couldn't stop. And at Christmas, when I confronted him in front of everyone, he panicked and lied because he couldn't bear the idea of disappointing our parents. He explained that the last 6 months had been hell for him, living with the guilt, watching the farm struggle without my help, knowing it was all his fault. I'm not going to lie, seeing him like that, so broken, softened me a bit. I was still angry, still hurt, but I could also see he was genuinely sorry. I told him, "Matthew, what you did didn't just hurt me. It damaged our relationship probably forever. I don't know if I can trust you again." And he nodded, saying he understood, that he didn't expect me to forgive him immediately, but that he wanted me to know he was going to spend the rest of his life trying to make it up to me. Things changed after that. My parents stopped protecting Matthew so much, started treating him more harshly when he made mistakes. And with me, they started treating me differently too, with more respect, asking about my work, about my life, really listening instead of just waiting for their turn to talk about the farm. Matthew and I talk on the phone every 2 weeks or so, slowly rebuilding something like a relationship, though I know it'll never be like before. As for the money, I decided to help again, but differently this time. I hired an accountant to manage the farm's finances, someone neutral who could ensure the money was used appropriately and everyone knew exactly where it was coming from. I send less than I used to send, only what I can comfortably afford, and I get monthly reports on how it's used. Last week, my mom called me just to chat, not to talk about the farm or ask me for anything, just to ask how I was, if I'd met anyone interesting, normal mother-daughter things. And at the end of the call, she told me, "Nicole, I want you to know, I'm proud of you, of what you've achieved, of the person you are. I know I haven't told you enough, but I am." And that, after everything that happened, meant more than she probably knows. I don't know if things will ever be completely normal again. There's a scar there, you know? A mark from everything that happened. But I guess we're trying, and that's something. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't confronted Matthew that Christmas, if I'd just kept sending money in silence, letting him take the credit. I probably would have saved a lot of drama, but I also would have kept feeling invisible in my own family. So I don't regret fighting to be seen and recognized, even if the path to get there was painful. At the end of the day, I deserved better, and now I'm finally getting it.